Hello, I'm Delusion Dispeller, and as promised, I am reading from the book Safe People by Dr. Cloud and Dr. Townsend. I'm reading chapter 1 today. What is an unsafe person? As a college student, I, John, dated around a bit, but I enjoyed dual friendships more, until a friend introduced me to Karen. From the moment I saw her standing in my friend's living room, my world turned upside down. Karen was an attractive blonde and a committed Christian with a sly sense of humor that peeked out at unexpected intervals. Intelligent and popular, she was at home in both formal settings and at a Saturday touch football game. We started dating and our relationship quickly became exclusive. We dined at cheap, student friendly restaurants. We went out with friends. Sometimes we even studied together. One of our favorite activities was sitting in the campus center, making up stories about the people who walked by. She'd see an FBI agent on the prowl, and I'd add that the agent was actually part of a conspiracy to take the university president hostage. Over the next few months, our relationship progressed. I was still dumbfounded at how fortunate I was to have Karen, and I thought that perhaps this was the woman God had meant for me to marry. Caught up in my wonder and excitement, I missed a few things. A few times Karen couldn't meet me for pizza or class, and she'd say she was busy and quickly changed the subject. I figured I probably needed too much from her, and never pressed her on it. One time I dropped by her apartment to surprise her. Hearing voices, I knocked and said, "It's me." The voices stopped. After knocking several times, I shrugged and left. Maybe Karen and a girlfriend were having a private talk. Who am I to intrude, I thought. Another time, my friend Bill told me he'd heard that Karen had a history of breaking hearts. "Be careful," he said. Certain that Bill was probably jealous or mistaken, I brushed it off. But most troubling was what we'd do when we were together. When it was what Karen wanted, it was a pleasure. If she needed to hit the books, she made it fun. If it was time to play, she was a riot. But if it was I who needed to study, instead of studying with me, she'd get impatient and go out with her friends. The same imbalance occurred on a deeper level. I was mostly there for her. She seldom was for me. Once, when I was in the middle of a conflict with a friend, Karen didn't see me for a few days to let me sort it out. One day, the truth I'd been avoiding came crashing down on me. I walked into her apartment and caught her kissing another guy. I remember Karen looking around to see me, a surprised expression on her face. She broke her clutch with my replacement. Then, holding his hand, she smiled and said to me, "I've been meaning to tell you, John, but I knew you'd be the kind of guy who understands." And I did, in a way. No temper tantrum. I didn't jerk Mr. New's head off or challenge him to a duel. True to form in my relationship with Karen, I smiled in a hurt but mature way and mumbled something like, "Absolutely, I understand. I'm sure it was hard for you." Karen thanked me for this gift of understanding, and I walked away. I saw her occasionally over the next few months, but our lives began moving in different directions. I took longer than a few months to recover, however. I thought Karen and I were much more involved than we were, and I was in shock. I talked about thoughts and feelings that no one else was privy to, and entrusted her with deep parts of me. I was under the impression that our souls were becoming deeply intertwined in preparation for a lifetime of love, family, fun, and service to God and others. It took a long time for me to accept the fact that Karen could switch bows like most of us change socks. In fact, I heard through the grapevine that this scenario repeated itself many times. The relationship hurt my pride and my sense of trust, but even more, I began doubting myself. What's really funny is that even though I knew how bad Karen was for me, the catch my breath feeling didn't go away for a long time. I'd pray about her, friends would counsel me and listen to my grief. I'd see all the character flaws I'd missed: duplicity, dishonesty, irresponsibility, self-centeredness. And then I'd see a snapshot of her, or even worse, catch her walking down a hall, and I'd be flooded with tender, longing aches that were just as strong as the day we'd met. You could have been walking with me, reading out loud a long list of Karen's 7 deadly sins, and it wouldn't have mattered. I'd still be suffering from cardiac flip-flops. God was good to me, and I grew up in some areas. I finally did marry, and Barbie and I are very much in love. I can't imagine life without her, and I can see all the reasons Karen and I wouldn't have worked out. Yet for years I wondered why I could be so wrong about thinking someone so wrong was so right. Now let's move out of the romantic sphere into all of your relationships. Think for a minute. Have you ever had a relationship with a Karen? Maybe a best friend, a coworker, a relative, or church acquaintance? Have you had more than one? Most of us have. Have you ever been left, used, or hurt? And ask yourself, what in the world am I doing wrong? You're not alone. When we're wounded by people, it's second nature to blame our need for attachment. You may think, there I go again, trusting people and not God, or just goes to show you people can't be depended on. Though it's true that people aren't perfect lovers the way God is, Scripture teaches that God created us for relationship with both Him and with each other. When at creation God declared it is not good for the man to be alone, Genesis 2:18. He was not just talking about marriage, he was declaring the importance of relationships. Part of being made in God's image is having a need to be in a relationship. The problem isn't our need for friendship and connection. That's good, a God-ordained need that He built inside us. But without the proper maturity and skills that need for support and attachment can get us into real trouble. The real problem is that we're untrained in discerning the character of people. Character discernment. One evening, I, Henry, spoke to a group of Christian college students about dating and relationships. At the close of the talk, I asked, what qualities do you look for in a potential date or mate? The answers went something like this. I want someone spiritual, godly, ambitious, fun to be with, and so on. They replied as I had expected. And that disturbed me, for as a counselor and as a person, I know that these are not the issues that cause relationships to break apart. When I questioned the audience a bit further, asking them about character and relational issues, they were in the dark. They continued to give me broad religious answers and descriptions of people that had little to do with what the Bible actually says about relationships. People in trouble don't say broad religious issues are the problem. They say, he doesn't listen to me. She's so perfect that she can't understand my struggles. He seems so distant that I feel alone. She always tries to control me. He makes promises but really doesn't follow through. He is condemning and judgmental. She is always angry at me for something I did or didn't do. I tend to be my worst self with him or her. Cannot trust him. And the list could go on. These are the painful complaints that friends and counselors hear from hurting people as they describe their relationships. When we listen to God address His problem relationships, the list is much more like the second than the first. He says that among other things, His people are far away, Isaiah 29:13, unfaithful, Joshua 22:16, proud and perfectionistic, Deuteronomy 8:14, Psalm 36:2, unloving, 1 John 4:20, and judgmental, Romans 2:1. God does not use religious terms and language when He discusses people. He talks about how people treat Him and others, and whether or not they get things done as they said they would. In short, He looks at someone's character. He's looking at their makeup as a person and the way that that character interacts with Him and the world. The Bible is full of religious people who could have fulfilled the list the students gave that night. But these people are the ones that Jesus and the Old Testament prophets confronted over and over. They look good on the outside or from a distance, but to get close to them is a nightmare. We do not get a lot of training in evaluating character. We tend to look on the outside and not the inside of a person. 1 Samuel 16:7, Matthew 23:25 through 28. So we choose people based on outward appearance and then experience the inside of them. We look at worldly success, charm, looks, humor, status, and education, accomplishments, talents, and giftedness, or religious activity. But then we experience the pain of being in a real relationship with them and come up very empty-handed. So who are the bad guys? John's boys, love Saturday morning cartoons. They especially like the superhero, supervillain types, and they enjoy picking out which character is the good guy and which is the bad guy. These shows, of course, make it easy for them. The good guys are clean cut with heroic features and strong voices, but the bad guys are ugly, dress horribly, and have low, menacing voices. In real life, the bad guys aren't that easy to pick out. Unsafe people are particularly difficult to spot. Quite often, unsafe people appear winsome and promising, and their character problems are often subtle. So, how do we know whom to trust? Well, there are many different kinds of unsafe people. Many of them fall into three categories: the abandoners, the critics, and the irresponsibles. Let's talk about those. The abandoner. Abandoners are people who can start a relationship, but who can't finish it. Ron had recently come to the painful conclusion that at 39, he had no significant friendships that had lasted for over 1 year. You know, I'll be 40 soon, he confided, and I'd always thought that by that milestone, I'd have several anchors, men I'd known for at least a decade, men with whom I'd spent time praying, playing, golf, arguing, and trusting with my deepest feelings. It hasn't happened yet. I'll meet a guy, we'll get together for lunch, meet the wives, and within a few months, they've lost my number. My slogan for them is nice guys, where'd they go? Ron was drawn to abandoners, people who can start a relationship but can't finish it. They begin with statements about companionship and commitment, but they leave us when we need the most. Often abandoners have been abandoned themselves. Sometimes afraid of true closeness, they prefer shallow acquaintances. Others are looking for perfect friends, and they leave when the cracks start showing. Abandoners destroy trust. Those they leave in their wake are apt to say, I'll never have anyone who will be there for me. This is a far cry from God's ideal, that we be rooted and established in love, Ephesians 3:17. And those who continually pick abandoners often become depressed, develop compulsive behaviors, or worse. Critics. Critics are people who take a parental with everyone they know. They're judgmental, speak the truth without love, and have no room for grace or forgiveness. Martha walked out of the church shaking her head. It was deja vu all over again. She'd been searching for a safe fellowship of Christians where she could grow and serve. For the last year, she spent several weeks at various churches getting to know the attitudes and values of the congregation. It was uncanny. The last 3 churches she'd visited were legalistic, rigid, and critical. Their doctrine could be summarized: if you're a Christian, you should have your act together. And she'd done it again. She'd sat through a sermon on how godly Christians don't sin and ungodly ones do. Even though Martha understood that all of us sin, whether we're Christians or not, she couldn't shake her real worry. Why was I attracted to this type again? What's wrong with me? Critics are more concerned with confronting errors than they are with making connections. For example, they often jump on doctrinal and ethical bandwagons, which are important, and neglect issues of love, compassion, and forgiveness. They often confuse weakness with sinfulness and therefore condemn others when they have problems. Critics tend to point the finger outside rather than at themselves. They will sometimes become indignant at the trouble others cause and propose solutions like think, feel, believe, and act like my group as the cure-all. Critics often deeply love truth and righteousness because they are clear thinkers. They can be good people to go to for information, but don't go to them for relationship, for their truth often comes poisoned with judgmentalism. If you're attracted to critical people, you may find relief in their clarity of thought and purity of vision, but you'll also find yourself guilt-ridden, compliant, and unable to make mistakes without tremendous anxiety. Irresponsibles. Irresponsibles are people who don't take care of themselves or others. They have problems with delaying gratification. They don't consider the consequences of their actions, and they don't follow through on their commitments. They are like grown-up children. Jeremy, a friend of mine, John's, was constantly in financial straits. He was always broke and in a money crisis. He would come to me and ask for a loan, saying, I'll pay you back in a few weeks when things straighten out. I cared a lot for Jeremy and felt valued that he trusted me enough to ask. So I'd lend him the money. Time would pass, there'd be no repayment. and he wouldn't mean it or wouldn't mention it. Then months later, he'd be in another jam and ask for help again. I'd grudgingly agree. He'd promise to pay back both loans back, and again, nothing would happen. Finally, I figured out what to do. I told Jeremy, from now on, the word loan doesn't exist between us, only gift. I know you mean to pay me back, but you don't change your financial habits enough to pull it off. So when you ask for help, I'll either give you a gift, never expecting to see the money again, or I'll just say no to the request. Jeremy thought I was crazy, but it helped me a lot. That's the kind of thinking you have to survive with irresponsibles. If you depend on them to do what they say, you can end up in financial, functional, and emotional trouble. If you are drawn to irresponsible people, you may be doing the following. You pick up after them, you apologize to others for them, you make excuses for them, you give them chance after chance after chance, you pay for their sins and forgetfulness, you nag them, you resent them. Many irresponsibles are caring, warm, fun-loving people. I like irresponsibles. They help me notice what's going on in life today instead of being anxious about tomorrow. There isn't a place in there tomorrow. They're often empathic and understanding, but while I like irresponsibles, I just don't trust them. They're irresponsibles. The irresponsibles' lack of dependability can cause us many problems, ranging from making us wait for her at a restaurant to losing a crucial business deal because he didn't get the documentation in on time. As Proverbs puts it, better to meet a bear robbed of her cubs than a fool in his folly. Because the irresponsible has problems in delaying gratification, he or she often becomes alcoholic, addicted to sexual aggression, and in debt. You may be providing a safety net for an irresponsible, but for some reason you end up paying for his or her problems. We could be talking about a friend, an adult child, a spouse, or a business relationship. For every irresponsible, there is an enabler, someone who protects them. These are just 3 examples of the many types of unsafe people. Think about your present support system. You may be in a relationship with an abandoner, a critic, or an irresponsible. In the following chapters, we will talk about more specific character traits of unsafe people, and we will contrast them with the godly character traits that safe people have. In this way, you will be able to look for danger signals in your relationships. Then learn to make wise decisions about how to handle the unsafe people in your life. Stay tuned for chapter 2 soon. God bless. Thanks for watching.